In this episode, I chat with evolutionary biologist Colin Wright. We talk a little bit about his field research. He works with social spiders. I got creeped out through most of that part. He's very good at describing them. It's really interesting. It's just, I'm a little bit afraid of spiders. So anyway, it's still good. It's interesting. I think you guys will like it. And then we move on to discuss the definitions of gender, his perspective on that, and also his concerns about the changing definitions of biological sex. I think you guys are going to like this episode. I really, really had a good time chatting. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So so I'd like to start off with, why did you start or decide to get into evolutionary biology?
Oh, wow. Okay, so that was...
It's just a small question, you know?
Yeah. So this was actually over maybe 10 years ago. So when I left high school, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I kind of wanted to get into business, and so I started at a community college as a business major, actually. I never did well in school, like in high school and even grade school, and then I really didn't like being a business major, and so I actually pretty much flunked out of community college. Like literally, I was on academic probation, and then like I still was failing classes, and so they told me like I couldn't come back anymore. I got dismissed from a community college.
Oh no!
And then I did real estate for a couple of years, but that was timed perfectly almost when the market crashed, and so then I couldn't do real estate anymore. Mm-hmm. But I was kind of at the time reading a whole lot of books by Richard Dawkins, by Carl Sagan, Stephen Gould. I've always been really into science, but I was just kind of now just getting into evolution in a big way. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of at a point in life where it was like, well, I can't do real estate. I flunked out of school because I wasn't good at math. I didn't want to do the sciences. But then I fell in love with just evolution, and I just sort of decided one day that I thought evolution was the coolest thing ever, and then I was going to devote all of my time and attention to doing that. And so I reapplied to community college. I had to like plead with them so they'd let me come back in and start as a biology major. And then I guess I must have been convincing enough, and they let me enroll in classes. And then basically the rest is history. I've just been on that path for the last decade or so, and it was a good choice.
So what was it? Do you know which specifically was the thing that like drew you to evolution, like that fascinated you?
Yeah, so I've always sort of been interested in some of the big picture questions. I've always sort of been philosophically minded, and I think just evolutionary biology sort of touched on so many of those big questions that I was just curious on, like where did humans come from? What is, what human nature? What is our position in the universe on Earth among animal species? And evolution to me just like answered so many of those deep questions like no other field did. Like, I could learn philosophy or physics and things like that, and those would be useful to describe the world around me. But I felt like evolution really went at the core of like the human condition, and just can explain so much, because everything we do is basically has to been passed down through generations. So everything is in a sense an evolved feature or a byproduct of evolution. Mm-hmm. So so I think that was pretty much the main reason that got me so interested in it. It just really radically changed my worldview once I just realized the reality of evolution, what that actually means. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to fast forward probably a few years because you got your degrees. Wait, so what do you have? So you have your PhD, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay, and what is your...
Just last year.
Okay, what's your specialty specifically?
Yeah, so, my degree says evolution, ecology, and marine biology.
Ooh, really? I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was like a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't do any marine biology.
Really? Okay, so you're not even...
That was just the name of the program. So I started actually grad school at the University of Pittsburgh in just their evolution and ecology program.
Okay.
But then my advisor, he took a job at UC Santa Barbara, and their program is the evolution ecology, and then they have a marine biology. It's all lumped into one. And so I followed him. The whole lab moved to Santa Barbara. So I got admitted to the marine biology program. But it's not like everyone did marine biology there. There's maybe half of the faculty did, but it's just part of the program name.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm more of the evolution ecology side, and if I could even get more specific, I would say I do evolutionary behavioral ecology, which is basically studying the behavior of animals and looking at the selective advantage or the fitness consequences of animal behavior, basically.
Okay, so fitness consequences, like what does that mean?
Yeah, so in evolution, when we talk about fitness, we're talking about something that is like a proxy for survival or reproduction, basically. So an individual is said to be very fit if they have a lot of offspring, basically. They're creating more copies of themselves. And some people would say that, we actually need to track, the reproductive output of your offspring, not just your offspring, but your offspring's offspring. And then some people are just content with looking at what they call fitness proxies, so not measuring fitness directly as in terms of how many individuals, like how much offspring you have or your longevity, but looking at things that are related to fitness that they know, like how big are the eggs that you're laying, how many eggs are you laying, and in terms of my wasps, it's going to be like how big are the nests at the end of the season.
Your wasps, yeah,
which is a good. We call that a proxy for their fitness, because we're not actually counting how many reproductives that come out of the nest, but that's correlated with nest size, so we can kind of just look at nest size. So yeah, so it's a measure of the reproductive output of a particular organism. Basically, that's their fitness, and fitness is always relative. There's not like an absolute fitness. It's just that I'm so fit compared to other individuals in my population, basically.
Okay, so I've actually wondered this, like, where do you keep these, like, your populations? Because I kind of imagine two things. I'm going to give you mine, just because so you know what the regular lay person is imagining.
Yeah, I'm always curious of what people think from the outside.
So it's either, like, a lab with a bunch of, like, cage type things, and it's just very gray and, like, metal. So that's one. Or, like, I don't know, kind of like beekeeping kind of like imagery, like out in kind of out in nature, but in little hive type things. I don't know. That's what I imagine. So
yeah, it's a little bit of both. Okay. So when I go in the field, there's a lab and usually a field component to what I'm doing. So I'll often, when I collect the wasps, I'm in the field collecting them, and sometimes I'll wear a bee suit, so you kind of got that beekeeper aspect going. But then I bring all the queens into the lab in boxes, and some of the boxes, these metal boxes, metal crates that they can't get out of. And that's where I'm testing all their behavior, basically. And then I'll either keep them in the lab and do lab tests with them, or I'll take them and put them in the field in nest boxes or something if I want to track their behavior or their survival in the field directly.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little bit of both. It's lab and field. Right now, there's no wasps out right now because there's snow out here. So I'm just in the lab here at Penn State, and I'm working on ants right now. So it's
okay.
So there's just a bunch of ant colonies on my desk, basically.
Oh, that's like cool. So what did you think of like Ant-Man, by the way, since that's like your thing?
I haven't seen it.
What?
I'm not much,
that's your thing.
I'm actually not into like superhero movies, and people sometimes are really offended when I say that.
Well, it's more that I just want to know your take on it, because they have them talk with ants comment. And stuff. Oh well. Next time, okay.
Sorry, maybe I need to watch that, because
I should give you some homework.
I think people are going to assume that I watch that or something.
So, okay, well, that was just an aside, but okay. So, when you're studying these things, these populations of different insects, I think you said, so you're working with ants and then wasps. Do you work with anything else?
I do, yeah. My whole dissertation was on social spiders.
Oh, so, right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because on my Twitter profile, yes. You see like the spiders.
I don't like looking at it. So, but I do know.
It's very polarizing for sure.
Yeah, it's all those spiders. Yeah, the spiders they're pulling something apart and eating it or something?
Yeah, there's an ant. So there's a certain type of predatory ant that commonly raids their nests, and this is all done in South Africa, is where these spiders and the ants are located. And so we noticed, kind of by accident one time, we were trying to do a study just on the spiders themselves and their survival out in the field, and looking at how much prey each colony is catching, and we were supposed to track their survival over a long period of time. Then we came out the next day. And they were almost all of them were getting raided by a bunch of these really voracious red ants. They're called pugnacious ants.
Oh.
And so that was my first time in the field. And so then we realized that we had to deal with these ants, and I was looking for something to study. And this seemed to be a really strong selective force on these. I mean, they're just getting annihilated. So I decided, for my dissertation, I basically studied this interaction between the ants and the spiders, and looking at the distribution of personalities within a certain spider colony, and if that can sort of mitigate how easily ants can take over their nests, and how they respond to ants repeatedly over time, and if they behave differently based on how their colonies are structured behaviorally and things like that. So that was what my dissertation was on. I was doing wasp stuff simultaneously, but at the point when I was about to graduate, my story with spiders, I had a few more I had more papers that were published on that, and so it told a more complete story for sort of a dissertation worthy thing. So that's what I chose to ultimately have in my dissertation.
So what's the goal? Is there any sort of beyond? I mean, the goal is to understand these creatures, but do you study with the intention of applying to humans, or is that not even on your radar?
I mean, it's kind of peripherally on my radar. So there's a whole side of animal behavior called applied animal behavior, where they're looking at stuff like that. They'll look at maybe like farm animals, and they'll look at things about like how to best take care of them, and with their well-being in mind, or training dogs and things like that. So that's more of an applied side of animal behavior. My stuff isn't so much applied in that way, meaning like how it interfaces with humans, but it's basically looking at and constructing models for types of behavior that are basically plausible in nature. Like, what types of interactions do we see between individuals? How do these compare to other species? Can we explain the evolution of certain types of sociality by comparing and contrasting different species in the way they're social, to kind of maybe reconstruct some sort of story about how sociality evolved in the first place, and then conditions where things like group personality might change certain outcomes. So like when in my dissertation specifically, I looked at how things like fear can change the behavior of an entire group.
So they get afraid?
Well, I mean, I guess I might be anthropomorphizing a little bit by saying they're fearful, but basically we'll look at their behavior in just like a neutral context. We'll have them we'll vibrate their nests or their something in their web, and see how fast they all scatter out and attack it. And then, so what I did is when I looked at basically how quickly and how many numbers of spiders came out to attack things when there weren't any predators around. And then I had some colonies that were doing the same thing, but I had sort of these predator cues, like these underneath their colony. So all these ants were underneath, where they couldn't interact with them, but they could like maybe smell them. That had all the chemicals were permeating through their containers, and just having the chemicals of ants around would drastically change the entire behavior of the whole colony. Okay. So it's just kind of adding like fear to these situations. So I mean, these things could possibly be applied to.
I'm just thinking about the fear thing. I'm like, I feel like that's kind of happening in our society right now, the fear-based reactions. So
so I guess all these could like maybe tie back to humans to some degree. The thing is with, I work with spiders and wasps because you can do things with them that you just can't do with humans. Like I can, like the spiders are on an annual cycle. I can look generation by generation.
Right.
I can construct artificial groups of known personality type, and then I can see which ones are dying and living. These are things that would just be extremely unethical to do with humans, and it would probably require a stack of paperwork that
Yeah, I mean, it's the paperwork, really, versus the unethical. But yeah, I know what you mean.
And you can't follow, multiple generations of humans to look at certain effects. And so these are all, I guess, informative of maybe the types of dynamics that could be going on in humans to some degree. I mean, it's probably more relevant if you're studying like primates or something, but social spiders aren't so bad either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't even actually know that social spiders existed. So, because you just see one and I like run away. So I didn't realize.
There can be up to 1,000 spiders in these colonies sometimes.
Like, so okay, wait. Okay, what is your reaction though? Like viscerally, like do you have this sort of like, ugh, girl, like, or do you not? Like, have you gotten used to it? Did you initially 1,000 spiders? Like,
yeah, sometimes, yeah. So initially, I was actually quite afraid of spiders, and I do.
Wait, what?
I do consider myself to like some degree an arachnophobe.
Okay. Wow. I wish you would have said this first because it kind of changes.
Yeah. So I mean, I've always been fascinated with spiders. Like at my parents' house, sometimes you get those big like yellow garden spiders that have those giant webs.
Yeah.
And I'd throw moths in there and watch them go. Like,
oh, cool. Okay.
But if something jumped on me, like I would freak out.
Yeah.
Like I'm not just like, oh, look at that spider, let it walk in your hand. Like if I don't know the spider, I'm going to scream and freak out.
Okay.
And the first time I was working with the social spiders, because we catch these things, like you see their colonies on the side of the road. Then we get the colonies off a fence or something like that, and they're really leathery. They're really dense because it's just really thick silk, and there's all these tunnels that are going through it, and so they're all in these retreats that are maybe like the size of a softball. And when you need to get the spiders out, you literally just need to like rip them open.
Nice.
But when you rip them open, they freak out and they all just start coming out. And so this horrified me when I first started it, but just over time, like I worked with them for about 5 or 6 years, and so they try to bite you, but they can't. Like their teeth, their fangs literally aren't big enough to pierce your skin.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes you can feel them like trying. You can feel like a little, and it's kind of disconcerting, but it's all right. I just slowly got used to it and being bold, and
good for you.
So they don't bother me anymore, but spiders generally still will freak me out if I don't know what it is, basically.
Okay. I just like want to make sure you're human.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
I mean, Let's say that both the wasps and the spiders scare me. Like I'm horrified of my study organisms in ways that many other scientists probably aren't. Like they scare me to death.
Okay, good. Because I just want to. I'm like, how can I relate? Like this, you scientist folk, you don't just metamorphose into something else.
No, I mean I've got to psych myself out sometimes when I'm collecting wasps in the field.
Really? Oh, I guess so.
If I'll have to be like on a ladder trying to collect this wasp colony, and sometimes I'm in there in the morning, so they can't really fly away. But I'm usually not wearing like a bee suit, and I just have to do it. And if you do it right, they're not going to sting.
Do you get
Somehow I've avoided being stung. I've not been stung by my wasps. I've been stung by wasps in general, just not during my field seasons.
They know. They're yours.
Maybe this season's probably the one.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll see. You can let us know. So okay, I was hoping to chat with you about your Quillette article, because it kind of leads into other things I wanted to talk to you about. Would you kind of maybe give a bit of a summary about that?
Okay, I'll do my best here.
Actually, it doesn't have to be a summary. Like I mean, we have time. You can just. Don't read it. Don't read it word for word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can talk about a little bit like what came before that was the impetus for maybe writing that, and I can tell a little bit about what it was. So it was, how far back should I go? So basically I'll start back a little bit, but I'll try to move quickly through the history preceding it. As I've gotten to academia, there's basically been increasing reasons to self-censor. Back in the day, in the early, maybe the mid to late 2000s, I was very much like more vocal on social media, criticizing things like creationism or intelligent design, just because there was no social cost that you pay for engaging with these things, especially if you're into evolutionary biology and you're being a scientist.
Like as just discussions, like you would just talk with people about it, or like on social media.
like
Okay.
arguing with creationists
Yeah.
on internet forums or on my Facebook and things like that. And I didn't care who saw these discussions because it was just, I was really into evolution, and it's just, science versus unreason, basically. And then as I started going into grad school, you get more professors that are friending you on Facebook and more colleagues. And so I didn't do so much more of that activism, but it wasn't a problem still if it's, talking to creationists or intelligent design
No.
people. But that whole movement, or those two movements, sort of fell off the face of the earth a little bit. I mean, they're still there, but they're just not really prevalent anymore.
Right.
It's not like it was in the late 2000s.
Right.
But there's all these other topics that are, going on, like political topics that before I would have probably wanted to engage with, but I just increasingly withheld my opinions because, just things were getting more and more polarized. And as I was going through grad school, I mean, the political polarization just got more and more intense. And
do you remember what at that time? Because I know now what I have in mind is what I would guess, but at that time, what you were maybe withholding?
Basically, I've always had a lot of criticisms of sort of the social justice mentality in general that I just wouldn't touch on. Things like, if someone posted something about the wage gap or something, and I had
Hello?
correct, I just wouldn't. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah, the wage gap. You said. Oh no. Okay. Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So the wage gap.
So if there was some aspect that, wasn't correct, I wouldn't point it out because I just knew there would be a huge backlash and people would immediately be like, Colin's a sexist or something. And so I just kept censoring up until, maybe, well, I guess until I wrote my Quillette article. And what really propelled that was the fact that I was just seeing more and more, not just science denial in general, but people denying behavioral differences between males and females. Everything was being tossed up to socialization. There's just, there's no evolutionary cause, no genetic component to behavior. It's just all purely a result of upbringing. This was just the narrative that was being talked about to nearly all my friends on Facebook and social media.
Right.
And I was just self-censoring because I didn't want to have the backlash. Even though it was, my field directly. I mean, I study animal personalities. I know about the genetic link between, personality and behavior, between genetics and behavioral genetics of different species.
Those creationists aren't looking so bad now, are they?
They're all of a sudden they're not the bad guys anymore. Or at least
but you could talk to them,
they're not there in your face.
Yeah, you could at least talk to them. You could at least have a back and forth and not hate each other at the end. I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what really tipped me off is I was looking at some conversations on my Facebook, and people were talking about whether or not sex itself is a social construct. And at first I thought maybe they're talking about gender because that's something I've heard before people talk about, and I've had problems with that too, but I thought maybe they were talking about that. And there's some concepts of gender that are social constructivists, but there's other concepts of gender that are more like innate differences type thing. And so I remember just responding to them like, oh, are you guys talking about biological sex? And they doubled down. These are a bunch of anthropology majors. Yes, sex is not a real thing. It's a social construct. It's just a category that we're creating with our minds. It's not even a real thing. And this is it's just completely not true. And then I thought this might have been just a fluke, but then I've just been seeing it starting to crop up everywhere. It's on Twitter. It's other people on different social media, on Facebook. And it was driving me absolutely insane. Because I just moved out to Pennsylvania by myself. I don't have a big social group out here. So it was just like, and I'm sitting in my apartment just self-censoring like crazy. And I needed to address this because if someone, with my background isn't willing to speak up about this thing, like, well, who else has a chance to speak up? Who has any sort of authority about what's being discussed?
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of my mentors, a lot of my colleagues, they said this was a really bad idea. Like, do not write this article. Because I had a draft.
Really?
I had a whole draft, and I sent it to them. And some of them said, like, if you're going to publish it, make sure it's published anonymously. And then, then some even said, like, don't even publish it anonymously because that could be tracked back to you, and there's mobs that could like just go crazy. And I don't know exactly what it was, but part of what their criticism, well, let me backtrack. So what they all started saying was, well, the first thing they said was, this essay and everything you said in it is completely true. It's true. It needs to be said, yada, yada. But you can't say it because... And then to me, that was just extremely offensive. Like, wait, this is true? So you're agreeing that this is true and important, but I shouldn't say it?
Yeah.
And it was kind of that, I guess, that dissonance that I saw in the way this conversation was. And I kind of thought up to myself, like, who are people I admire out there who are, speaking their mind about things that they think are true? And, I asked myself sort of like, what would Christopher Hitchens do in this sort of situation? It became clear that, like, someone needs to speak up. And I realized that the horizon for when I was going to be able to speak my mind was just, it kept getting pushed out further and further. So I was looking for a postdoc at the time. I have one now, but, I didn't want to say anything too offensive online or, perceivably offensive because I don't want to, risk my chances of getting a job. And then now I'm looking for faculty jobs, and so I need to self-censor too because I need to get a faculty position. But then once you get a faculty position, then there's 6 more years between your job there and getting tenure. So I'm just looking down the road, and I'm seeing about a decade or more that I would need to self-censor. And then a lot of colleagues say that tenure is not even really going to help you.
Yeah.
If the mob is angry enough.
Right.
And so I just made a decision that I wasn't going to play that game of, do I want to be an academic and self-censor for the rest of my life, or do I want to be someone who's able to just speak my mind freely? Be a full, just an intellectual, someone who's trying to understand the world better and get ideas out there. So that's what I decided to do. So I sent in the article to Quillette, and they accepted it pretty quickly, and it was published within just a few days. And then ever since then, I've just been out on Twitter now. So
you've been outed.
I had almost no Twitter presence before then, and now I'm on there a lot, and I'm vocal. So it's sort of a social experiment I'm doing. Can I still get a job in academia if I'm just openly, speaking my mind about things that I think are important? So. So most of what I just talked about here is sort of in the Quillette article about kind of the self-censoring that academics are doing, the denial of sex differences, and the way that a lot of news outlets are kind of trying to portray that debate or create the debate out of nothing. So that's basically what's in that piece.
Well, I remember you did speak about the Nature article that came out, the one about gender and sex not being based in biology. That came out in the summer. I think that was because I remember when that came out, and it was rather startling to see Nature writing that. And so I think that you mentioned that was one of the breaking points for you for I can't not say something.
Yeah, because before that was the Scientific American articles. And then you see the biggest, most prestigious journal in the world, Nature, just 2 feet jump in the pool with them about sex denialism. And that piece was just terrible too. I mean, they talk about gender, I think, in the title, but then when it gets down to it, they're clearly just equivocating between sex and gender almost every sentence. And so it's unclear what they're saying, but then they do make statements that are making it very clear that they're talking about sex not being able to be determined by anatomy and genetics, which is just the most wrong sentence I can possibly imagine uttering.
Yeah, I think that they brought up intersex people, but they didn't give stats because that's like 0.000 percent of the population, right? Like that's not. Those are the exceptions.
0.02% is what is the common. I mean, so there's.
Okay. So I exaggerated.
There's people that say that it's 1.7%, but that's taking into account a lot of conditions that are no means intersex in any
Okay.
clinically relevant sense.
Okay.
I mean, they including things like Klinefelter syndrome,
Right.
where basically you have like, two Y chromosomes, like if you're XYY or if you're XXY, but those people are still like unambiguously male.
Well, I remember Abraham Lincoln isn't he? Didn't they
I'm
say
not
that?
sure about that. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, he was just like really tall and like. Okay, I'm talking about things that I don't really know, but I just remember hearing that the theory was that he had that. Anyway.
Yeah, or like things like Turner syndrome, where those individuals are just they're female. Like there's no ambiguity about their sex.
What is it that they have though? Is it 1X or something?
See, Turner syndrome. It's a good question. I think it's either just 1X, I think, or maybe 3. I should know that.
Oh, you're like,
yeah.
Should I know that?
Yeah. So I mean, they have usually problems with fertility and things like that, and they're usually a pretty short in stature, but they're still like
female
genitalia wise, like they're clearly female.
Okay.
So if you get to the 0.02% statistic, when you sort of make the definition have some clinical relevance, which corresponds to either actual like sex ambiguity, like anatomical ambiguity, where you look at it and you can't tell just based on genitals, or there being a mismatch between your genetic sex and your phenotypic sex, the way you appear.
Okay. And that's less than 1%.
Yeah, when you use those, that comes down to 0.02%, basically.
Right. And again, like it's not that there's a call to make those people feel othered, but it's just that it's a small percentage of the population and we don't need to change our definitions. And it's not even those people. I don't think that it's intersex people that are being pandered to. It seems like it's trans people or trans activists that are being pandered to in this. Do you think or no?
Yeah, I mean, you do see a lot of trans activists bring up intersex people, which really has nothing to do with trans at all. I mean, it's completely different. The vast majority of intersex people, they do not identify as trans. And the vast majority of intersex people, even if there is sex ambiguity just of their genitals alone, they're still, like, the rest of their body is clearly male or female. Like, for instance, some intersex conditions, like if you use the expanded definition, something just like an enlarged clitoris or a micropenis are considered intersex conditions. And that's clearly has no clinical relevance because they're still, they still look like males or females. You wouldn't be able to tell. And even when sex is ambiguous, that's just purely their genitals ambiguity. But the rest of their body, I mean, someone could look just like me or you, and you would know, and they could still have an intersex condition.
Right.
And they don't identify as trans either.
Right. So it doesn't even have anything to do with it. That's interesting.
Yeah. And a lot of what you see in those articles too is they portray sex as sort of like this spectrum, or they'll say like the idea of two sexes is overly simplistic, but that's just not the case, because they're trying to imply that there's maybe more than two sexes, and maybe even an infinite number of sexes, but that's just not even close to what the definition of sex is, which is based on gamete production or potential production of gametes and how your body is basically developed in orientation towards producing a certain type of gamete. And intersex people are not a third sex at all. There's no third type of gamete. There's nothing between eggs and sperm.
Right.
And so even if you concede and say that like maybe some intersex people aren't male or female, which is not the case, it doesn't mean that they're a third sex. Like they're just it can be okay just calling them neither male nor female.
Okay.
But they're still just two sexes.
Right.
So that's kind of the issue that you see a lot of people trying to argue.
I've heard Heather Heying and Brett Weinstein describe, I think it was gender, as bimodal. Do you agree with that, or would you say it's binary? Or I think it was gender. I'm not sure if it was sex or gender. I think it was gender though. What do you think of that?
Yeah. So it really depends on your definition of what gender is. Because I think some of the biggest confusion that's happening in discourse on Twitter especially is that there's maybe about 5 different definitions of gender out there that people are using almost interchangeably, from person to person. So for instance, if you're more on the right side of politics, when you're talking about gender, man and woman, you're really talking about like adult human males and females. It's almost equivalent to sex.
Right.
And then you can have sort of the radfem or anthropological definitions that talk about gender as being sort of a social construction. It's the expectations that society puts on individual sexed bodies, but like you're gonna look at a female and you're gonna assume that they're gonna be more submissive and they're better caretakers, and you look at a male and you're gonna think that they are gonna be more dominant and they need to withhold showing emotion. So that's sort of the social construction definition of gender. And then you have things like the psychological or clinical definitions, which talk more about like individual identity and how in relation to your body. And so there's all these kinds of definitions of gender. So it's hard to say if gender is just bimodal or not. I think when Brett and Heather, when they talk about gender, I've heard Brett and maybe Heather too talk about gender being the software, and then sex being the hardware. That's one way to look at it. That's one possible definition of gender you could go with. And in that sense, yes, I would say gender is bimodal, because your sex is going to influence a lot of different psychological traits. It's going to influence your software and push it towards one way or the other. So you're going to have, on average, males have more traits that are stereotypically male, and female traits have more stereotypically female traits. So in that sense, it would be bimodal.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, no, that's good, because
it might be a long answer, sorry.
Yeah, well, what is your, no, I wanted that. So what is your definition of gender? Like, what do you, okay, this might sound, like, I want to say, well, what's the correct definition of gender? But then I don't know if that is the way I want to ask that. So I'll let you take it away.
So I'm actually writing a piece on this sort of topic right now. I don't know if we can say if there is a true definition of what gender is. And I tend to, we can talk about what definitions of gender I think maybe are most useful. And if we frame the question like that, I'm actually pretty sympathetic to certain aspects of like the radical feminist definition of gender, but I also have problems with their definition too. But I think it is very interesting to look at gender in terms of as defined as the cultural norms and expectations and roles that we sort of place on individuals, that we expect of certain individuals based on the sex we perceive them to be. Okay. I think that can explain some interesting social phenomena, like why are transgender people, why do they face discrimination? You see a trans individual, like a trans woman, well, are they facing discrimination because they're trans? Like, I would say no. I would say they face this discrimination because society perceives them as breaking the social norms and expectations they have with people that appear to be male. So they're gender non-conforming males, and people discriminate against people based on that. Just like if you have a really assertive woman or something who, like Hillary Clinton got a lot of this, they're called bossy, whereas if it was done in a male, you might say like, oh, they're just a good leader and they're assertive. And so people would discriminate against, a female who's expressing masculine traits because they're breaking their gender non-conformity away. Okay. So I think there's an interesting way to look at gender that way, as a sort of a social construction that can explain sort of certain dynamics of oppression. But then I think a lot of the radical feminists, they go a little too far, though, because they usually tend to be social constructionists in a biological sense, too. They tend to be more blank slate individuals. They tend to downplay like genetic or evolved differences in behavior that can maybe serve as the basis for these gendered stereotypes. Right. And so I think kind of the social constructionist definition of gender, kind of mixed with a software definition of gender that maybe
Right.
Brett are for. I think those are in some combination of two. I think actually would explain the vast majority of what people mean when they say gender.
Okay.
I tend to reject a lot of the self ID that you're the gender that you just happen to say you are, because to me that's just makes no sense, because then there's essentially no difference between the behavior of what a man or woman can do. It's just based on what you say you are. So then how can you tell people that you are or are not a certain gender if there's no trait that you can express that would make you not a certain gender? Then the concepts mean absolutely nothing, basically.
Right.
So yeah, so I don't like that definition at all.
Okay.
So I hope does that make sense at all? So
I think so. Well,
yeah, so
okay.
I have ideas of gender that I think are more useful, but I wouldn't say that any of them are just are correct. I think we need to sort of ask people what they mean when they say gender. So when we talk about gender, we can make sure that we're actually talking about the underlying concepts rather than just the words we're using.
Right. Okay. Well, because the thing that I was thinking as an example for the sort of atypical gender norm fitting in wise, and then you can tell me if that makes sense. Like, say, for example, I enjoy Twitter way more than I enjoy Instagram. Like, I'm horrible at Instagram, and I am very successful with Twitter. And I think it's because I would consider the way I interact with people and with ideas, I would consider that, I suppose, in a more masculine space. Does that make sense? Like, because I enjoy talking about ideas, and you can't really do that on Instagram because that's more pictures based, and Instagram, I think, sort of appeals more to females, and then women, and then Twitter with men. Is that kind of the sort of outside of the typical roles kind of definition of gender? Not saying that makes me trans or anything, but just that, I guess, within the bimodal thing of well, you might be on different planes in some aspects of personality. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So definitely. So yeah, when we talk about people's minds being more or less male or female typical, basically you can break down personality traits of individuals on a bunch of different axes. I think there's the big 5 personality traits for people, like conscientiousness and extroversion, introversion, things like that. And so you can still be a really extroverted female, or you can vary on all of these personality traits in certain ways. There's nothing that's saying that you couldn't just look at someone's personality traits and tell if they're male or female. You can probably take a pretty good guess if you combine all of their traits on a survey. Okay. Take them all into consideration. But basically, with respect to any one trait, people are going to exist somewhere on a spectrum, and all that sex is doing, it's going to be basically throwing a weighted die, basically. You're going to say, since I'm a male, it's going to be weighted more up towards more masculine personality traits than feminine. But it doesn't mean you can't still have really masculine females that are still more masculine than some or most males. Right. There's going to be overlapping distributions for each of these personality traits.
Okay. Yeah. So there are we're talking about differences, but there's quite a bit of overlap.
Oh yeah, big time.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And for any one trait, I've heard people use the example of looking at someone's face. You can pretty much look at a face just alone and say oh, that's a male, that's a female. But if you were to look at one aspect of their face, if you were just looking at noses, it's going to be a little more difficult. If you're just looking at someone's mouth, that's going to be difficult to do. Or how far their eyes are. I feel
I don't know. I feel like I feel like I have feminine lips. I don't know.
I mean, you will on average have more more feminine features, but each of them are going to each of your features together is going to fall somewhere on that spectrum, and it's going to be, if you're a female, it's going to be leaning towards female. But if you're just looking at one trait by itself, it's going to be more difficult to identify the sex of the individual than if you stood back and looked at the entire face altogether. That's basically a summation of all these differences that sex influences together.
Okay.
And that's going to be the same with like personality traits as well.
Right. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I wanna like find a test to like see if I can guess noses or something. I don't know. I'm sure something exists like that on the internet, but
maybe.
Anyway, so okay. There was an article again, I think by Nature, about the male-female brain recently.
Yeah.
And is it basically what we just talked about, or like they were arguing that there is no such thing as the male or female brain?
Yeah. So again, it's like their titles are way more problematic, I guess, than some of their content. Their content was still bad too. So they're basically saying, I think it was the myth of the male and female brain or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then if you go in the article, they say that, scientists have never found the one trait that makes a male and a female a female. They're saying like it's not like we're going to find something totally unique in the brain of a female that makes them female than the brain of a male that makes them male. But to me, that's just a complete straw man, because there is no scientist and no one would expect that the brains are just going to be different things altogether. It's not going to be the equivalent of like, a brick house versus a straw house. Like, no, they're still human brains. They're going to differ in ways that are going to be typical of certain male or female traits. So you can say that there are male typical and female typical brains, but it's not like they're going to be so different where they're different in kind.
Right.
So, you could say the same thing about human brains and chimpanzee brains. We still have, brain stems, prefrontal cortex, we still have all these things. They're just different to a certain degree.
Right.
So nature's kind of making this argument that since we haven't found that, the one thing that we can definitively say makes males and females different, therefore there's no such thing as male and female brains, which is just completely, it's true in the sense that, they differ, statistically, but they don't differ like categorically. But you can still construct models where you can look at certain structures of the brain and you can predict with up to sometimes 95% accuracy the sex of the individual just by looking at their brain, even controlling for things like size of the brain and total volume. So it's not true that there aren't sex differences, and that seems to be the underlying, I guess, message they're maybe not overtly saying, but there's a big subset of people out there that really think that that's who they're getting all their clicks from. And if you look at the comments, in those the Nature articles like that, it's people saying like, haha, like, blank slatism is the way to go, like, all the scientists think that, sex differences are real, but they're not. That's not what's going on. I made an example before. It'd be like if you had a well-known like flat earther out there, and they are publishing in Nature published a paper, like let's say that flat earthers were everywhere and they were politically viable and they're voting candidates in based on flat earth ideology, and then you have Nature writing an op-ed or something that has the title, the earth is a lot flatter than you might think it is.
Okay.
Which isn't like completely false, because we know the Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's actually kind of like crunched a little bit.
Okay.
It's a little flatter than a perfect sphere.
Okay. So they're like, we're not lying.
So it's like technically true.
Okay.
But it's still extremely misleading, and they're not taking into account the massive amount of people who are going to read it as being in evidence for a flat Earth, or as in this case, as evidence for blank slatism. And so they have to know that these are the people that are clicking on that. It's really shameful that Nature is doing that just for clicks. It's what it's. Yeah.
Okay, because that was what I was going to ask about. Why would they do this in the name of science? And so it is, you think, because they have a base that they think will read this and like this and share it?
I mean, I think that has to be the case. I don't know. I mean, and you could also make the argument that what they're saying isn't totally false. Like, yeah, we haven't found a little thing in the brain that's like a switch that makes someone male or female, but nobody is saying that nobody is saying that. Like, it's just yeah, they're constructing a false enemy, and then they also have to take into account like who are the people that are going to just eat this up. It's going to be the people who are into blank slate ideology, and then their titles are worse than the content,
Right.
when they're just saying that the myth of sexed brains. Yeah, it's just extremely misleading, and I do think it's just because there's an ideological bent. Things are really politically polarized, and it's guaranteed to be a well-cited study, probably.
Right, I guess
suppose.
so. Yeah, I saw a comic type thing. I don't know if it was you who shared it, of like when people say male versus female brains, and it was like two brains and one was pink and one was blue. And it's like that people are like, oh, this is what people are expecting, what is meant, and it's like, no, it's not like that. Is it okay? Is it similar to the whole like, oh no, feminine knows on its own versus or not? Like taking a look at one trait, you can't tell, but when you put it all together, is it similar to that?
Yeah.
The face, but in the brain.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different like aspects of the brain, and I'm not like a neuroscientist, so I couldn't go into detail.
Right.
But you can look at some of like the microstructures of brains, and a big part of the literature. So there's been a few papers that have come out that said, we can't find any evidence of these like definitive sex differences, but that's because they're looking at maybe like one thing, like the thickness of a certain region of the brain, and they're saying like, well, we can't really tell which ones are male or female based on that one to any like high degree of certainty. But if you take in multiple traits, if you do what they call a multivariate analysis on it, take in the thickness of certain regions and how wrinkled it is in maybe some parts, or how much gray matter there is. If you take in multiple things at once statistically, then you can create a much more robust predictive model where you can say that, based on all these traits taken together as one, we can predict with 95% certainty that this is a female brain, or a brain belongs to a female. But any one trait is going to be much less. Maybe if you're looking at one trait, you can only predict, with 55% certainty or something. But if you take two traits that are, with more, that are less than, with more than just 50-50, then you can get more and more precise the more traits you're taking in simultaneously.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the same thing with brains.
Where do you think this is going to end up?
Ooh.
Prediction-wise? From your perspective as an evolutionary biologist.
It's really hard to say. At some point, I'm shocked that it's gotten this far where people are actually denying that sex is a real thing, because I've compared it to flat earthers before, but if you actually think about it, like before science was in a position to like to have methods of testing that the earth was flat or not, it could be a perfectly reasonable thing to think that the earth was flat. I mean, that actually requires some degree of sophistication to perform that test to decide, for a cave person to decide if the earth is flat or not, or if it's a sphere. But with sex differences, I mean, cave people, dogs, cats, every mammal, most insects, they can tell the difference between male and female of their species. This isn't something that our ancestors were fumbling around in the past, just like curious on who are the ones.
We don't even know. Isn't it what like caused us to be here? Knowing the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so like, just at a glance, anybody can tell the difference between a male and a female. With the small caveat of the 0.02% that maybe it's ambiguous. But yeah, this is not a mystery. It's never been a mystery. And it's just shocking that all of a sudden people are saying it's such a big mystery when it isn't. So I'm shocked it got this far based on just deceiving your eyes. Like it's just so clearly false, which really entails how strong the ideology is behind behind that. It's keeping that there, that idea prevalent when it's just so clearly not true. So I don't know where it's going to go. I think it might have to get worse before it gets better. I think you definitely need more people to speak up and just call this out and not be afraid to be called like a transphobe or something, which is inevitably what's going to happen if you're talking about the reality of sex differences nowadays. But yeah, it's needed. I think more people need to speak up, and hopefully eventually more people will just be fed up because the vast majority of people have to realize how crazy it is. Whenever you see polls that are taken on this, they're Twitter polls, and they're not scientific polls, but they're almost staggeringly one direction of saying that biological sex is real. Almost everyone on the right side of the political spectrum understands that sex is a thing. They think it's ridiculous what people are talking about, like that people are denying it. And I think most people on the left are aware too. It's just
a very small
subset of really, really vocal activists that are just trying to push this through. Yeah, it's a problem.
And is this for the sake of, like, say, trans people's acceptance in society? Is that why push this otherwise? Is that kind of, because that's what I was imagined that's what that's for.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I guess, I think they're trying to erase biological differences, because if there's no biological differences, then everyone starts from the same place and that everyone is equal. And if it's society that's creating these differences, well, then society can be fixed. And then when you're able to fix society, then you fix the world, and then everyone can just live in this, this equal utopia. Yeah, and it's just so short-sighted, because we do know about the reality of innate sex differences in behavior, and so it's never going to go away. Like, there's always going to be these differences that come out, no matter how much you try to change society. These differences are going to surface, because it's there, it's baked in. And I think a lot of the social justice people, they mean so well, but they're just completely wrong on this topic, and their aim to just distort society as much as possible, to try to make everyone equal, is failed. It's doomed to failure. Absolutely.
It almost seems like if we acknowledge the difference, that means we're rejecting people who are trans, and it doesn't seem like that has to be the way to me. And I know that, because if we could just maybe chat about your friend Jen Smith, because she is a trans woman and perfectly fine saying she is a biological male.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little about what happened with her?
Yeah, Jen is really interesting, because he actually goes by he.
Oh, he does. Oh, okay. I'm like trying to be like.
I mess up too. I still call. I mean, I'll say. To me, it's easier to call her she, because
Jen.
That's how she presents.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very interesting, and her name is feminine name. Yeah. So I first actually interacted with her just on that when I was on RT America, the news program. And she was the other person who was being interviewed during that. I had no idea who she was before that point, actually. Yeah, but she's pretty unique in the trans world, who's an outspoken activist for the reality of biological sex. She recently got banned on Twitter for quote-unquote misgendering an individual, because, again, Jen is of the mind that sex is different, and when we refer to people as he and she, we're not making an assumption on how they identify. We're just using the fact that they're an adult human male or female, and we're calling he or she. It's a sex-based distinction, which is a reasonable perspective that someone could have, but Twitter happens to just have a completely different perspective, and so she suffered the consequences from that pretty badly. Yeah, so she's.
Is it permanent, the ban?
It is permanent. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, because I specifically listened to the Joe Rogan interview with Jack Dorsey. The second one with Jack Dorsey and Tim Pool, and they talked about Meghan Murphy, and they said how she had a couple other strikes, and that they don't personally ban people unless there's other strikes, that they give you warnings.
Yeah, she may have gotten warnings before. I don't quite know, because I've only known Jen very briefly, just since that news broadcast and on, so I don't know her past, but
it just seems really intense.
It's likely that she had misgendered somebody, just because that's part of her ideology.
Right.
Makes a different distinction than the self-ID trans movement.
Right.
So she may very well have technically misgendered people and gotten multiple strikes. I'm not sure. It's really
either
unfortunate.
way,
she was a really powerful voice in that whole conversation.
Well, yeah, because we don't even actually know, because there's activists that some are trans, some aren't even trans, that are trans activists, right? And we don't really know. It's the same with that whole vocal minority, silent majority type thing, where we don't know how many trans people actually want biological sex to be non-existent. We don't really know that how many people are upset about it in that world. And anyway, but yeah, so it's something that I was quite disturbed by. I remember when I found out, because you said that, because you were in on that conversation too, and nothing happened to you, but you were you were pretty careful, I think you said.
Yeah, so I understand that Twitter uses the gender self-ID, definition of gender, where if you refer to a trans person who's if you refer to a trans woman as he, Twitter considers that by their rules misgendering. And so I just don't talk about that, because to me the whole gender thing is there's no right or wrong definition, and so I'm not going to argue with someone on what gender is really. I care more about sex differences, and I care when people are saying that I'm a trans woman and I'm a female, when that's not true, because I try to make the man, woman, male, female distinction as clear as possible, because male, female is the biology, and gender, depending on your definition, can refer to all sorts of things. And so the main objection I have is when people are saying that trans women are female. That's when I'll just raise my hand and be like, sorry, that's not true. And as far as I know, Twitter doesn't consider that misgendering, although there has been an instance. I don't know the details behind it. I just know someone posted a tweet that got them banned, where it was them basically saying that trans women are not female, and they got banned for it. So
okay.
So I don't know if that's just a fluke or if that's a change in some of their policy of banning, but that'd be really scary if that were the case. That would mean that people like me or other biologists can't say males aren't females, which is just insane.
Baffling. Well, yes, it's I think that the problem is so evolutionary biologists and the like are being sort of demonized, I feel like, as if you're trying to be mean. You're trying to be mean about it's sex is sex, you can't, as if you're trying to exclude and discriminate. And I know, because I've seen you tweet and speak with people, you're very respectful, and you don't want to be othering people and making them feel not part of society. You just this is literally your field. I even feel like it would be different if when the laity comes up and takes on a cause, but this is your field. And if you can't speak about male and female in your field, things get confusing.
Yeah, I would say this is one of the few subjects where we shouldn't actually have to defer to experts to talk about the reality.
I can't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean,
you're right,
but yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be. But I mean, that's the way a lot of people feel now, because of the way that people, the backlash they'll experience if they say this stuff. But yeah, so that's definitely a place where I draw a line. Is I respect individual trans people, I'm perfectly willing to use their pronouns, within reason. I don't know about the zir and all the,
and
the
Z, yeah.
7 different types of sets or more that you can use. But if there's a trans woman and they want to be called female pronouns, I'm more than happy to do it. Actually, it comes pretty naturally to me, as long as they're like trying to come across, they're dressing up. If they just don't do any moves to look feminine, then it's probably going to be more difficult. But if they have long hair and they're wearing makeup, like I can easily just switch to female pronouns. But yeah, so I guess where I draw the line is just going to be at the reality of biological sex. Like I will not give up the actual truth just to make someone feel better, I guess, because that's just it's just a huge slippery slope towards like what else are they going to have us deny? Like we can't deny our eyes. And then if we do deny this, if we do just concede that, like, okay, you're female, well, that has so many implications for, female only spaces, athletic leagues, sports competitions, things that were set aside specifically for females because they're female. Females have been an oppressed group in the past, not based on how they feel about themselves subjectively, but because of their biology. And that's something that we can't give up. We can't just let female be something that you can identify into, and have that make any sort of sense. So yes, that's the line.
What do you think is I guess, your evolutionary biology take on how, like, trans people have come about? I know sorry, I know you do insects, but
oh, no, it's fine.
Like, have you thought about that? Like that?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it comes down to, when I say that individuals, their brains, their traits they have, their personality, it exists on, it's bimodal, but with regard to any certain set of traits, they're going to be on 2 very big overlapping distributions. So you can have certain individuals, you can have a female that has that's super aggressive or something, a stereotypically masculine trait, but you can have certain females that are going to be more aggressive than most males are. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that they're a male, it just means that they're a really aggressive female or something. Now, if you then, there's a certain probability that any female is going to be extreme in any one trait. And then when you have a big, billions of people on Earth, you're going to have certain individuals that just happen to be, who are biologically male or female, who just by chance, maybe because they were exposed to more testosterone while they were in utero, or not much testosterone. We know that influences development and things like that. But sometimes certain individuals who have a male body will have brains that are more stereotypically female. They're more female typical on a vast majority of traits. Now, that doesn't mean that they are female. It just means that they're a male who just happens to have very female typical personality traits. And what a lot of people think what I think people are doing now is they're saying that, well, I don't fit into the those roles and expectations that society has of what a male is. I'm way more, and almost all my mental traits over here with females. Like I like to hang out, I like to do all these, I like makeup, I like all these things. And then society now tells them that, like, oh, well, maybe you actually are female, rather than expanding what it means to be a male and saying that no, males can be feminine in many traits. And there's no matter how many traits that you're feminine in as a male, like, it doesn't make you not a male. It just means that you're a very feminine male. And so I think that's what's going on with a lot of trans individuals. They're an extreme end of the spectrum that you wouldn't expect them to be, in more traits than one. and they identify more with these feminine traits, and then it makes sense that they could even look at their body and not like how masculine they appear to be. They don't like the fact that they have, a penis, or that they're a lot taller and that they are growing a beard. And to me, this would make sense if a lot of your mental traits are just far skewed to the female side. Sometimes I use the example of hands. So we know that your exposure to testosterone in utero can change the development of your hands. There's like a digit ratio that you can look at, and males have, I think, a larger ratio of their, I think it's the third and fourth digit of how long the digits are, and females have on average a closer ratio. Like there's less disparity in the sizes of their fingers.
Oh, okay.
And so we can look at, we talk about certain, like, hands being more masculinized, okay, and we can talk about, there's probably some females out there who have quite masculine hands. They could be hairy, they could be large, but no matter how large and hairy and masculine looking that female's hand is, it never at any point becomes a male's hand. Like, you wouldn't say like, oh, that's a really manly hand you have there, Andrea. Your hand, you're a female, but your hand is a male hand. Like, no, it just means that,
right. It's like, well, it's part.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that my hands are very
your
feminine.
your hands are not man hands.
Okay, but you're not gonna like chop. It's like, well, at what point is it here? Is it here?
Yeah.
That's the male. Just this, yeah.
Yeah. So we just need to expand the notion of the types of hands that females can have. Females can have masculine hands and not cease to be females.
Right.
Just as males can have more feminized brains without ceasing to actually be males. This says nothing about how they should want to express themselves. Like, they can still decide to transition if they want to, if it makes them more comfortable, or express themselves any way they want to. But then to deny that they're male or female is just not warranted, and I think it's bad.
Maybe it's not helpful in the end. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it just seems like, again, it's denying facts, and isn't that kind of like what coddling of the American mind is about? Like that's one of the fallacies of our society, is that we're frail and fragile, whereas we're actually anti-fragile. And the more you go, the more you can handle, then the more you can handle. So if you can handle that, you're like, oh, this fact doesn't line up with what I want to be, well, I can handle that and move on, as opposed to I need to change everyone outside to accept So is that kind of...
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going. The people are just too willing to bend over backwards, and as I can't remember who said it, but they're going to pave the jungle for these people, and make it so they're going to just change the whole world around them.
Okay.
Make the world conform to their worldview, rather than just deliver a fact that they might not want to hear, but that is nonetheless true, and that they are not the sex that they might wish that they were, and that's unfortunate. And if I had a wand and I could make them into the sex that they wish they were, like, I would do it. But we can't just distort reality or cater to some people's, and I hate to use the word delusions, but that's what they are when you get down to it. If you're a female and you say you're a male, like, that is just not true. And we shouldn't have a society that's going to tell people lies to make them feel comfortable.
Right. And that kind of goes back to that censorship thing you were talking about about people just having to keep their mouths shut when they knew things weren't right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's like that, the new speak or double speak or whatever that is from 1984. We don't want none of that. Okay, so I do have one question though, because you're an evolutionary biologist, and I have to ask, because I always am interested in things like this. And so What is your take on marriage being a social construct?
I mean, I would say, I mean, I could maybe see it being that way. I mean, it depends how you look at it. I mean, people have been monogamous, and well, it depends on the society. I mean,
I guess monogamy. It doesn't have to be marriage because that's more human. But
I mean, there's the basic biology, and we see it in other species too. That some species are more pair bonding, and some are not. I don't know. Would you consider a pair bonded, a pair of ducks who are lifetime pair bonded? I mean, we could say
they're totally married.
Yeah, we could say that they're like, they're pair bonded for life, but like, marriage itself is something that we've kind of constructed, I suppose you could say. It's written into laws, and laws aren't something that exist out there. It's something that we construct, and because we think it's useful for society. I would say, marriage, I would say, is a social construct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, I wasn't. I was hoping that it wasn't.
I think it reflects a real underlying biological trait that people have. The tendency for people to pair bond, or the value of that we think that might have for society.
Oh, okay.
So there's a biological basis for that, I think.
Okay, that's what I was kind of wondering.
But marriage itself, the institution and the laws, the institution, like that's a construct. But
you mean like monkeys don't do that at the zoo? Like,
I mean, if you want to say that a pair bonded, pair of ducks are married, then like.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Okay. You're like, that was my kid question. Like, hey, I have a question, teacher. What about?
Yeah, I usually think of like social construct things. Like an example I usually use is like an engagement ring or something like that. Like rings are a real thing. Like you can wear rings just for fun, but like the concept of like an engagement ring is a social construct. Like any ring can gain certain properties just based on like what people say are the properties of it, even if the object itself hasn't changed. Like a wedding ring and an engagement ring, like they could look like the identical rings, but one's the engagement one, one's the wedding ring. So but there's like an underlying reality of rings existing, right? But the social construct is like the meaning, I guess, that you give reality. Okay,
because I definitely tend to. I'm kind of like not a big fan of like the social constructionists, so I think that I kind of go a little too far and be like, nothing is socially constructed, but it's like, no, there are some things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. So yeah, and you gave a really good example. So okay, so I think that. Okay, I usually do one question at the end that's like my secret question, and it's just a secret because no one knows it but me. And anyway, why would anyone else know it? But it just has nothing to do with your subject or your specialty or what we've been talking about. So, okay, so I've seen you talk about like music before on Twitter. So what is your favorite kind of music and why?
It's hard to name any specific genre. I listen to a lot of stuff. I definitely have like a favorite band, but I don't know if I have a favorite genre.
Oh, well, you can just say your favorite band then.
So like my favorite band is a band called Primus.
Okay. Is it like Optimus Prime?
No. They're okay. So people often think they're like a funny band, like a comedy band, but they're not. They do have a few songs that are funny, but
okay.
They have a lead bass player who. So I used to play bass guitar a lot in a couple bands, and so he was just my bass playing idol, and it's some of the weirdest music ever. People either really love it or they really, really hate it.
Have you shared it before?
I haven't because. People, it's very polarizing. I'd say most people absolutely hate it.
Okay. Like, I'm curious.
Really hate it. Okay. I'll send you something if you want. But
yeah, I want to know. Yeah. I don't know. I might be in the hate it camp. But yeah, well, why do you like it? What is it like? First of all.
That's so hard to answer. I don't even know.
Okay,
I would
guess
say
we'll
it's
just.
kind of like it's like a psychedelic, weird, like
Like Pink Floyd-ish?
sometimes, but then it's got a funky. It's got like a lot of funk bass, and it's kind of can be really metal,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be, I guess, just silly sometimes, and I don't know, zany sounds like a word that would actually accurately describe their music
Okay.
sometimes. They have a bunch of CDs and none of them sound anything alike.
Oh,
They're very strange. But I don't know why I love them so much. But in terms of genres, I listen to, it depends on what I'm doing. I listen to different stuff. Like if I'm at home working, I have like mellow, like smooth beats that are going that are just kind of, no vocals or anything like that. If I'm at the gym, I have like some rap genres I'll listen to that are pretty hardcore, some
mm-hmm.
metal ones, or some weird dubstep ones, depending on what I get sick of. But yeah, I listen to like a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Sometimes some electro swing every once in a while, or
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
pretty good.
Electro swing. Is it like
I've been
swing
getting,
music? Like from
it
the
is. I've been
40s?
getting into a lot of like electro hybrid type genre stuff.
Oh.
So it's like swing music, but with more like club bass lines, like more kind of a
Oh.
house meets swing.
I can't even imagine it. I will have to look some of these things up.
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
good.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your tastes. Appreciate it. Okay,
Oh,
well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for chatting with me, Colin. This has been
awesome.
really enlightening.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been great.